This is Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, let's talk a little Businessweek Economics now, if we can, and we can. It's our show. We're going to do what we want. All right, Carol Massar, Jason Kelly here with you on a Friday afternoon, just asserting our authority, Carol. You know, do what we can. Delighted to have back with us Milton Ezrati, Chief Economist for Vested, joining us on the phone from Pennsylvania. Milton, how are you? How have you been since we last talked?
Hot and humid here. I've been fine, thanks. Watching the news carefully. Disappointed that it's not getting better faster, but hardly surprised.
Yeah. Why not surprised?
Well, we had this initial flurry, but even then the claim for unemployment insurance continued to remain remarkably high compared with their historic norms, and it's going to take a long time to get out of this hole that we created with the antivirus lockdowns and quarantines. And the numbers we got this morning on initial jobless claims still very high, 1.3 million, I believe the number was. Yes, and that doesn't put a lie to the very good jobs numbers we got earlier this month, but it does raise a level of skepticism about how fast things are improving.
Well, listen, all the big bank CEOs seem to confirm that. Jamie Dimon saying you're going to have a much murkier economic environment going forward than you had in May and June. David Solomon of Goldman saying, I think you're going to see a flattening in that economic pickup, and that will slow the progress that we made, the uncertainty persisting. What does that mean? Play it out for us. Play the movie that will be our economic life in the next couple of months.
The movie, it's going to be a slow-moving movie. There will be no great chases. There'll be no explosions. We had a great, at least it looked like great numbers earlier this month and the month before on the jobs report that the Labor Department puts out at the beginning of each month. The unemployment numbers, the initial claims for unemployment numbers temper that. It's going to be a slow climb back. It's nice to be an august company, but maybe that'll make me rethink things. But no, I'm only joking. That's the opinion I have.
So, Milton, I do wonder from an economic perspective, how do you see this balance that we're trying to strike between reopening and public safety? We just got a headline about California saying that most of their schools essentially are going to be remote learning again. Schools have really come to the fore as such a crux of this argument, in part because if kids aren't in school, we don't have a big majority or a big portion of the population, I should say, that's really truly able to get back to the office and maybe even get back to work in any meaningful way. What's the lens you look at that through? How do you look at that balance?
Well, I think we're going to be struggling with this balance at least up until the election and through the election. Everything will wait on a vaccine or some kind of tremendous improvement in new cases. And with the opening, whether it's in Louisiana or Texas or California, even as it's going slowly, it is still the rate of the number of cases is rising, and that puts the fear of the virus into the politicians. So I can't blame them. They're walking a tightrope. But we're going to be doing this kind of thing well into the new year.
So okay,
that means the jobs don't come back that fast.
Well, right. That's what I want to know. So what's the scenario? Just briefly, the scenario we don't get any more aid. So what's the economic recovery look like? We get more aid and continue to get support. What does that recovery look like?
Well, that recovery, effectively, we don't have people at work. We have people being supported by various mechanisms to keep consumption up and to keep employers from making permanent downsizing. So to that extent, I think it's worthwhile for the longer term, because we don't want them to say, well, we're just going to downsize, because that means the jobs go away forever. But it's going to be tough coming back. Most of these people, or I shouldn't say most, a lot of these people are in service areas. They're in leisure and hospitality,
right.
And people are not going to travel like that. And these are chambermaids and waiters and cooks and whoever, and they're not getting their jobs back, and not for a while, at least not in the numbers that would bring us anywhere near where we were this time last year.
So aid or no aid, you're saying? It's just because those industries are just not happening. We know, was it UAL, right, has talked about cutting thousands of workers.
They have, and what we want to do is support industry, support business, support these people, the consumer, enough so that we get less of that than we might otherwise get. So I'm not saying the assistance isn't worthwhile. In fact, I think it is, but it can only do so much.
And so, as you model this out, and it sounds like, from what you just described in answer to Carol's questions, it's sort of bleak on an unemployment picture for the foreseeable future. What does that look like from a numbers perspective in terms of either unemployment rate or continuing jobless claims, even if we think about the rest of the summer?
Or growth, right, yeah.
Yeah, well, the growth will be there to some extent. I don't think we're going to see negative numbers in the third and fourth quarters or the first quarter of the year for the GDP. But in terms of the jobs numbers, we're going to see unemployment rates above 10% for quite a while. And we're going to see these initial claims for unemployment probably near 1 million a week for the foreseeable future. Now, the thing is to look if they're coming down. It's the same thing with the virus. You know, if the new cases level off and begin to come down, the reopening can occur a little more quickly. We get a little faster improvement, but it's only a little faster because people are not going to go and throw all the stops out. So we're going to see these numbers, these ugly numbers, near 1 million, over 1 million, slightly under 1 million for the foreseeable future, certainly through the summer and up until the fall.
Right, numbers we couldn't
Vaccine
even
would change everything.
Right, and numbers we couldn't even imagine if you go back to January and February of this year. Milton, thank you.
If you go back for 40 years, you couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
No, that's
it's
a really good point. It's a really good point. Milton, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Have a good and safe weekend. Milton Ezrati is chief economist at Vested, joining us on the phone from Glen Mills, Pennsylvania. He's also the author of 30 Tomorrows: The Next 3 Decades of Globalization, Demographics, and How We Will Live. And I feel like a lot of that is changing, Jason.
Totally. Yeah. And I
Right?
think when you start to think about the numbers and the scope of them, we've been numb to them a little bit, not in a good way. We need to keep thinking about that because, you know, the million give or take, 10% plus unemployment, it's bleak.
Those numbers are people. Let's not forget that.